Welcome to the Pen Leader Podcast, where strategic leaders get straight to the topics, strengthening our awareness and sharpening our minds. The Pen Leader Podcast is produced by Roar, a production division of Mays & Associates Ltd. Find out more at www.maysassociatesltd.com. Now here is your award-winning host, Dr. Shan DeGore.
And welcome back to the Pen Leader Podcast. Today's topic, we'll be talking about a cause for giving. And I have Shannon Spencer as a guest with me today, who is a highly experienced leader and fundraising executive. And she is currently the Vice President for University Advancement at Ohio Northern University, where she works on strong community and corporate relationship building. She does major gifts, annual giving, alumni relations, university marketing and communications departments, and she is led a $112 million Forward Together campaign, which is the largest and the quickest campaign in the university's history. So when we talk about raising funds and challenges, this is something that Shannon knows lots of experience in doing and obviously is very successful at doing. She has actually been at 3 different universities looking at and running foundational campaigns and operations and nonprofit organizations and administration. And she has a bachelor's and a master's degree from Bowling Green State University, which is also my alma mater. So I'm excited to have her on the show. And please welcome Shannon Spencer.
Thank you, Dr. Gore. I'm excited to be here today.
Excellent. I can't thank you enough for coming on because, when we talk about raising funds, and there are a number of organizations that are leaders that are trying to raise funds either for campaigns or because their organization needs to do this to stay afloat, right? To stay in existence. I think this is a critical subject area because there's so many have a desire to do it and to do it well. And you obviously have, I would even say, mastered it because you're not only running campaigns, but you're actually meeting goals and doing it in a very quick way. You're obviously passionate about it. There's other things that you're passionate about.
Sure. Of course, I'm passionate about my family and my friends, and I'm active in my church and on a foundation board for my denomination. But when I think about what I'm passionate about living generously. That can mean different things. That could mean including giving to others from your own resources, your time and your volunteerism, loaning your talents, using your skills and experience, and sometimes giving your money. Can also mean living or giving the benefit of the doubt, using your network to lift up someone else. Living generously impacts the lives of others, but it also has enormous benefits to the giver. People who live generously have better health and well-being and increased joy. And as a leader and fundraiser, I get to work with people who are living generously every day. There are people who want to be a part of the solution and are willing to be generous with their resources to make a difference. In my career, I received so many of what I call thank you notes for thank you notes. Appropriately, I express gratitude to a donor. I can't tell you the number of times where people reply to me with gratitude that I introduced them to the opportunity to help others in ways that brought them so much joy. And so I'm working with people who are living generously, and everybody benefits.
So when we talk about living generously, and then of course they have to have a cause to understand why they should give. How do you even approach that subject with them to get them started?
Sure. Well, I think it's really important to say you have to listen to people. Fundraising is about listening to people and understanding what's important to them, finding out what their passion is. You have to build relationships, and there's a sweet spot where the organization that you're working on behalf of and a donor's passions and needs of the organization kind of meet. And that's where the real excitement happens. That's where, I'll give you an example. I was working with a couple who were considering a scholarship. And they know scholarships are important and they appreciate scholarships, but they weren't really passionate about it. And an opportunity came up where we were going to relocate the Office of Study Abroad into a bigger and more visible space for students. I talked to them about that. And it turns out they were people who had exchange students and they had both traveled abroad extensively and really appreciated the fact that brought in their perspective on the world. And suddenly they were so excited and they actually wanted to give more because this is something that was so important to them.
So that tells me the statistics I was looking up for our opportunity to talk that people are giving and they're giving in large amounts. People don't think they're giving now, but they are. I saw a statistic from 2022 where Americans actually gave $499 billion to charity. And a large resource came from individuals. So it wasn't even foundations. It sounds like it came from individuals, 319 billion of that. And that's representing 64% of total giving. Are you experiencing that as well?
Yes, I think over many decades, so there's some good and some challenging statistics hidden in there. Over many decades, a big challenge for nonprofits is that the actual donor count is going down. And at the same time, people are giving in different ways. People are still philanthropic. Nonprofits have to meet them where they are and be ready to give them experiences and easy ways to give. So a lot of people don't get counted anymore, right? So what are you doing, Shanna, when you go to a restaurant and they say, would you like to round up for, this charity, this local charity that we're supporting? And you say, sure.
Mm-hmm.
Or you're getting a link from somebody that is a GoFundMe campaign and you're donating to that. A lot of philanthropy right now is not being counted in the traditional ways that it used to be. It's hard, especially for nonprofits who are sometimes resource challenged, to be able to keep up with the technology that our donors really expect, right? They want an Amazon type experience with ease of giving and personalized appeals. Nonprofits are really trying hard in that direction, but there's some things that, things are changing so rapidly that those are challenges right now.
I would have to admit, I'm one of those individuals that PayPal, I don't typically even put my credit card in. I lean toward my PayPal because I feel that's more secure. And
yeah.
Though that's a different way of giving than I gave 5 years ago or even 7 years ago. Those are different pathways. So I truly see what you're talking about with nonprofits needing to make sure that they're making the ease of giving, not only the reason for giving, but the ease of giving in a compatible way with the donor.
Yeah, we had a few years ago, we instituted digital wallets here at ONU. And within a year of that, 40% of our annual gifts online were coming through digital wallets.
Mm-hmm.
Some organizations are considering how to accept cryptocurrency, for example. Cost of keeping up with technology is high for organizations and in the staff required to manage it. And then things change so quickly that you have to be on it, right? The newest thing comes out and you have to be ready, especially for newer generations of donors.
Mm-hmm. Well, the fact that you've got $112 million, you've not only met your goal, but you did it in a very quick manner, which I think that stands out, amongst fundraising, because individuals could say, well, we've been working on this for 15 years, and then by the time you have that goal met, the goal might have changed actually because it's the prices, and especially if you're constructing buildings. So you have to be very mindful when you set these major goals, a couple $100 million. I think that can be a real challenge for actually you're specifically in universities. So I would even say universities at this point. Would you agree?
Absolutely. Campaigns are interesting. Capital campaigns are, you're building a building. We dedicated our new engineering building in 2019, and that was a campaign that lasted roughly 5 years before that. And of course, prices went up during that time, from the time you start the campaign and you have an estimate and drawings and the time that you end the campaign and dedicate the building. Hopefully you have a team working for you that's really good at building into contingencies and other things that might be needed in the budget. But capital campaigns require cash. It can't be a case where someone says, I've left you $1 million in my estate. You can't build a building on that.
Mm-hmm.
So different campaigns have different ways of counting. Certainly in comprehensive campaigns, which was our most recent one, we did have a lot of planned gifts. Planned gifts, the importance of planned gifts, and that means gifts given out of estate or deferred in some way, charitable gift annuities, gifts that people are giving today but won't be realized until later. Those are becoming more and more important because they are providing dollars that will sustain an organization on an annual basis if you have a lot of them. So some of the biggest gifts of our campaign certainly had estate gifts as part of them or planned giving as part of them. And often when someone makes a planned gift, by the time that gift is realized many years later, it's usually bigger than when they gave it, right? It's the nature of investments and resources that grow over time. Planned gifts I'm seeing become increasingly important to all organizations.
Excellent. What advice would you give a leader who needs to make an ask or who is facing a need that's a couple $100 million? I think I'll start with the larger and then I'll work back to those that are nonprofits that are much smaller for their budgets. But let's start with the larger ones. They've made a commitment, they know what they need, and some of them don't know where to start, or maybe they do, but they're not sure if they've got the right folks on the bus to do it. So what advice would you give them?
Sure. Mostly I would say, when I think about a leader who needs to make an ask, I think of our president or the CEO of an organization. And we partner as fundraisers with those people all the time. And I would say you should be able to lean heavily on the people who are working in your organization on fundraising. They often know a lot about people. They can help you prepare for that. But at its core, fundraising is about building relationships with people. And if I'm bringing a leader in front of people who have an interest in funding at our organization, what I want the leader to do really is inspire confidence in their vision and in the project that they need to talk about, in the ability of the organization to get it done successfully. If you don't have a true, deep relationship with a donor, they may still give to your organization out of a sense of loyalty or obligation, or because they like you as a fundraiser or they like the leadership. But until the leadership is able to inspire those gifts that are so generous that they're transformative because they believe in what they're talking about, you won't get those big transformational gifts.
So that leads me now to the smaller nonprofits. You've seen and you've worked with and you've given your time to help those that are actually smaller. And when I say smaller, it would be under $10 million operating budgets. What advice do you give them?
Sure. So, I've worked in really big shops, medium-sized shops, and small shops is what we usually say. Are you a small shop? Right.
Right.
So fundraising ultimately is the same no matter what level it is, how many people you have. Larger operations just cover more people, right? So the important thing for a small shop is to identify those people that they have relationships with or could develop a relationship with, who are the most passionate about their cause, because those are the people who are going to stick with you. And, we have long-term donors donors get excited sometimes about the big project, right?
Mm-hmm.
And sometimes that's the reason they get involved with your organization. But once they get to know you and they love you, then they're often ready and willing to make gifts to things that aren't as exciting. I have a retired donor here who knows how important building maintenance is and was willing to establish a fund that would spin off, an endowment actually, that would spin off money to fix the boiler or put on a new roof, right?
That's
not where he
great
started.
News.
That's not where he started.
Okay.
But certainly smaller nonprofits have, sometimes there's a lot more stress put on them as far as, you're fundraising to make sure that you can stay open and complete your important work next year,
Mm-hmm.
not even 5 years from now. And I think that boards are so important in that, utilizing your volunteers, making sure that they are equipped to tell the great story about your organization, because volunteer fundraisers basically are connectors, people who are willing to be sponsors of your organization when you're not in the room, who are willing to introduce you to people. Those people are also really critical to your success. And sometimes you can't afford the latest CRM or the latest giving technology, but certainly I think that, people can help you develop meaningful relationships with people who will support you for a long time.
Excellent. I think that what you're talking about moves towards some trends. And I was going to ask you specifically if you've seen any trends that are happening and may occur maybe in the next year to 2 years. What are you seeing in the marketplace?
So I mentioned before that there's really a twofold big challenge. And this speaks to not only large organizations, but especially to the smaller nonprofits that you were just referring to. The annual number of donors to nonprofits in the country is decreasing. And at the same time, the desire of donors to make gifts to support the operating budgets is also decreasing. So we're seeing that donors, and young donors, even if they're making a $25 gift, they still want to say how it's spent, right? Not just give it into your operating budget. So fewer donors and less budgetary support. A lot of nonprofits rely on unrestricted gifts to stay viable. I think that that's going to be increasing as people look at AI. Everybody's talking about AI. There are a lot of things about AI that I think can be helpful in fundraising, especially with personalization of fundraising appeals, predictive analytics, which we use in fundraising. But one of the challenges of it is the aspect of it that I have heard called artificial intimacy. So there's this culture of perceived relationship and perceived intimacy that has been cultivated by interacting with people through social media, through chat bots, etc. And these kinds of relationships aren't of the same quality or connection or meaning as interacting with people in real time and in-person ways. So in a sense, we have newer generations of donors who interact more with our organizations through technology, and they're interacting more with us than previous donors, and yet they aren't as meaningfully connected. And artificial intelligence is going to bring us a lot of new challenges, like how, for example, do we keep our donors' information secure? Cybersecurity. AI is collecting and regurgitating information all over the internet all of the time. And so what safeguards can we put in place so that our donor information can't be uploaded into systems that aren't owned by the organization, for example? There are a lot of questions to consider. Legislative changes and other things that can have a real effect on fundraising and on nonprofit operations. One of those is the increase, or I should say a tax law that has increased the threshold for taxpayers to be able to itemize. So that has caused a real decrease in the number of donors who no longer have a tax incentive to give, right? So many more people take the standard deduction and don't itemize anymore, where itemization was showing them the benefit of being able to support their favorite organizations. Many people, there's been a dramatic increase in the number of donors making gifts through donor advised funds or AFs, we call them. And those are ways where a donor can actually give their money to a third-party organization, such as a charitable community foundation or a fund through a national organization like Schwab and Fidelity and places like that also have donor advised funds. And then the money sits there until the donor decides where to give it. And there are good reasons to do that. Donor advised funds have been around for a really long time, like since in the 1930s. But just recently, they've exploded. Billions of dollars are sitting in these donor advised funds. And I'm a big supporter of DAFs and community foundations that are doing critical work in their regions. But it's going to cause nonprofits to develop additional relationships with the foundation funders and also to think about their appeals differently.
I think your point about AI and the interaction and how it's going to impact even with writing of the letters for the appeals, how individuals write grants. And because many of those foundations demand that you put the request in through a grant period, and there's open periods and closed periods, it is a different way of thinking, and it may redirect some dollars, like you said, right into those funds, and those in particular holders of those great dollars that we would hope that gets out in the community as soon as possible. I can't thank you enough for that insight, because I think it's important, hopefully, that both the nonprofits as well as the leaders who are leading organizations who are doing these asks, I'm hoping they catch all of these great nuggets of information, and especially if they've got campaigns they want to develop. I can't thank you enough for coming on.
Although there are challenges, there are great reasons to be optimistic. People are still philanthropic. They're still living generously, and they still want to support great organizations.
So thank you, Shannon, and thank you to our listeners and catching the podcast. I can't thank you enough for sharing. We appreciate that. And if you have any feedback or thoughts, you can always send that to info@mazeassociatesltd.com. We appreciate that feedback. So until next time.
The Pen Leader Podcast is hosted by Dr. Shan DeGore and brought to you by Maze & Associates LTD, creating customized solutions for growth in the areas of leadership development, strategic planning, and culture building. Find out more at www.mazeassociatesltd.com. Don't forget to subscribe to the Pen Leader Podcast and share with others.